Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Thursday, June 12th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Coming up, immigration is part of America's story. It can also be one of the most sensitive topics for Americans to talk about.
Many times in American history, including the present day, we see this dynamic playing out.
In light of today's debate, we step back to a different century in America where a novelist tells the story of Chinese immigrants. But first, today's headlines. The Fresno County Sheriff says he supports the use of the National Guard in the Los Angeles protests. As KVPR's Rachel Livenall reports, he's one of the few sheriffs speaking out publicly.
The message of support from Sheriff John Zanoni comes after anti-ICE protests broke out late last week in LA. The federal government activated the National Guard and U.S. Marines to respond. They say it's meant to help local police de-escalate the protests. Zanoni said his sheriff's office would do the same, to assist other law enforcement if needed during a protest. He said federal immigration agencies are just doing their job as the Trump administration ramps up deportations. He also criticized Governor Gavin Newsom's opposition to the use of the National Guard. But Newsom said in a speech Tuesday night that this is a dangerous turn for the country. For KVPR News, I'm Rachel Livenall.
Fresno County is in desperate need of public defenders. That's according to a report presented to the Board of Supervisors this week. Officials say the county has a 28% vacancy rate for public attorneys.
There is a statewide shortage of attorneys, but we are making progress with that particular unit.
Hollis McGill is the Director of Human Resources for the county. She said the county already hired 3 attorneys this week and sent out job offers for 2 more. Overall, officials do say the county's number of vacant positions across the board is the lowest it's been in 5 years. Democratic Congressman Adam Gray is aiming to make healthcare costs cheaper for veterans. He introduced a bill in Congress this week that would increase waivers for copay fees from patients seeking care at veterans' facilities. Officials say many veterans accrue debts from paying copays due to errors within the VA system. The current fee waiver is also in need of reform, according to Gray. California's Attorney General is advancing the state's effort to protect transgender athletes from federal pushback. Rob Bonta filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Justice earlier this week in anticipation of legal retaliation against the state's schools. The move comes after the DOJ issued a letter ordering school systems to stop a policy on transgender athletes in sports. The DOJ claimed that the state was violating anti-discrimination laws. The state's Department of Education declared earlier this week that it would not certify the government's demands. The competition to crown Miss California is once again coming to the Valley. This is the 101st competition. The events will be held starting next week at the Visalia Convention Center. Officials say $70,000 will be handed to contestants in scholarships and awards. Those who win will also be allowed to compete for the title of Miss America in the fall.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Body 20 in Fresno's Fig Garden Village, offering full-body electromuscle stimulation training sessions. It's a high-tech, time-efficient way to help preserve and rebuild lean muscle. Each 20-minute one-on-one session is guided by a certified coach using FDA-cleared technology. Body 20 accepts health savings account cards. More information available by searching the Fig Garden location at body20.com.
And now to our main story. President Trump's efforts to quell illegal immigration has drawn national attention, especially in LA right now, where hundreds of protesters have been arrested in recent days. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, recently conducted raids in the city targeting people without legal status. People took to the streets in response, waving Mexican flags in a show of solidarity. And there are signs that protests, as well as raids, are growing in other parts of the country. In light of this political climate, we're going to take a step back in time to the 1800s, when immigration was also top of mind. That's when many Chinese immigrants came to California, often through so-called Angel Island in San Francisco. It was a tumultuous time, with anti-Chinese sentiments making it difficult for people to immigrate here. The Chinese Exclusion Act was signed in 1882, and it's considered the country's first major law restricting immigration. But like today, immigrants persisted. Author Freeman Ng's novel looks at the process of trying to enter America through Angel Island. Bridge Across the Sky is considered a young adult novel and is written in poetry. To start, Freeman gives us some background on what's known as Angel Island.
When I mention Angel Island to people, the most common response I get is that, oh, the Ellis Island of the West, right? But actually, Angel Island was quite the opposite. Ellis Island is sort of all about give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, while Angel Island was more about the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. This was a law passed that prohibited immigration from China unless you were the direct relative of someone who was already living in the States. It came in the late 19th century at the height of anti-Chinese violence, really, and put a stop to substantial immigration from China for over 2 decades, until the San Francisco earthquake and fire, which destroyed family records and business records, so that after that, if you were wanting to immigrate from China to the U.S., you could pretend to be the close relative of someone who was already living in the States, and there were no records they could use to verify your story.
Wow. So that anti-Chinese sentiment in the 1880s, I know a lot of Chinese people came here earlier than that to help with the railroad and during the gold rush. Why do we know things changed around the 1880s? Do you know why?
It's because work ended on the railroad. Yeah, many Chinese did immigrate to America first to join in the California gold rush and then to work on the Transcontinental Railroad. But after the work on the railroad was done, you had all these Chinese men in the country who wanted to stay, continue working, maybe even bring their families over. And this led to what has been a repeated phenomenon in American history of white residents fearing and hating immigrants because they perceive them to be stealing their jobs.
I was going to say this is reminiscent of other situations and arguably even tensions during the Dust Bowl, when a lot of folks from Oklahoma were coming to California for jobs and competing with Mexican immigrants. I don't want to draw too strong of a line, but similar sentiment, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. Many times in American history, including the present day, we see this dynamic playing out. This led to some really horrific incidents of violence in the late 1800s until the law was passed in response. But after the earthquake, it became possible to enter the United States through what were called paper stories. And Angel Island Immigration Station was set up in order to house potential immigrants, Chinese immigrants, while their stories were being checked out. The process was that you would ask the immigrant and the supposed relative living in the States the same questions about their life back in China together, which they supposedly had. And if their answers matched, then they would be allowed in. And if their answers conflicted, then it was possible that they could be rejected. This was not an unreasonable solution to the problems posed by what I felt was an unreasonable law. But the problem was that the detainees' treatment at the station was very poor. The conditions were very bad. They were treated as if they were criminals already. And often their detentions could last for months or even years because of all the red tape that they'd have to go through to finally be examined and passed. There are stories of individuals who were detained for over a year and had not even been asked a question yet.
Wow. I want to pivot to your book, which sort of addresses this. It's titled Bridge Across the Sky, and it tells the story of a Chinese teenager going through Angel Island. Give us a little preview of the story.
Well, the essence of the story is that my teen protagonist initially does not even want to come to America. It's his father's dream to come to America, to come to Gold Mountain, as they called it, and to try to make a better economic life for himself. But the kid doesn't really want this. And because of this, he has to, in the course of the novel, find his own mission, his own reason for being here. And because of that additional factor in the story, the novel, I feel, grows into something bigger than just an individual story of immigrant endeavor.
And your father was an immigrant to the U.S. Did he play a role in you wanting to write this book?
He did. He was an immigrant to the United States. He came into the States through a process very similar to the Angel Island process, except through Seattle. His father was actually living in San Francisco at the time, so he didn't need a paper story. He had a legitimate story. Nevertheless, he was the member of the group who was constantly nagging the other members of the party, this small group of relatives who all came over together, was constantly nagging them to memorize their answers, to memorize their stories, because he understood that even though they had legitimate stories, if they got one little detail about it wrong, they could be turned away. And the questions were often very unfair in that they were questions that often you could not answer about your own home. How many windows are in your house? How many steps were there from your doorway to the front street? Questions like that. But despite having this history, this personal history, I was never interested in writing about the story of Angel Island until I heard about the poems. The detainees at Angel Island, in their anger and at their treatment, at their despair over their hopes, carved poems into the walls of their barracks. And it was when I learned about these poems that I knew that I had to write the story and that I had to write it as a verse novel.
Certainly, and very relatable for many folks who have relations to the immigrant story, which is a big topic right now in politics, as we recently said, with President Donald Trump taking a pretty hardline approach and a lot of people facing deportation, frankly. Do you hope this book contributes to maybe the ongoing dialogue of immigration in a more positive way?
I hope so, yeah. I hope that what this book can show, along with the many, many other stories over the centuries of immigrant experiences in America, is that fear of the immigrant has been a repeated tactic used by the powers that be. And it's important to understand that it comes from the same playbook, and that over and over again, immigrants that we once feared turn out to be valuable, productive, accepted members of American society. It's happened over and over and over again, and will continue to. Over and over and over again, there are certain parties that will make an issue of it and try to leverage it to produce fear and hate.
Before we let you go, Freeman, I was hoping you could read us one of your favorite poems from the book.
I'd be happy to. This is a poem in the voice of my protagonist. He has just participated in an action that led to improved conditions for him and his fellow detainees. And he's feeling very optimistic at this point about the future, more optimistic than he will be by the end of the book. But at this moment, at this midpoint, he's very happy. And he refers to, in this poem, to the fact of the San Francisco fire, which allowed all this to happen. The title is From Rubble. I lie in my bunk, unable to sleep yet again. I've gotten so little since the day of the action in the dining hall, awake through that night and far into subsequent nights, from worry at first and then in celebration, unwilling for the waking hours of these triumphant days to end. I imagine San Francisco ablaze with the fire that followed the earthquake, that made our entry possible by destroying the records of businesses and births, by wiping clean the slates on which we're writing our new stories. I imagine the fire burning on from city to city across this land, the world, consuming all of the past, the ancient hatreds, fears. A world broken and then burned. I lie in my bunk, unable not to dream of the new world rising from rubble and ash, in the light of bright days to come, and the moonlight faint through the windows.
Just beautiful. Freeman Ng, author of the new book, Bridge Across the Sky. Thank you so much for reading that and for joining us.
Thank you.
Today's episode was produced by Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you're going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.